There's a handful of gray powder that costs a few dollars, and when you mix it the right way, it doesn't just harden, it actually gets stronger over time, not weaker like normal concrete, not cracking apart after years, but slowly healing itself and locking tighter. The longer it sits, and the strange part is, this isn't new technology. It's something people figured out over 2,000 years ago, and somehow we moved away from it. So imagine this: structures built before modern machines, before steel reinforcement, before cement trucks, still standing today. Not barely holding on, but solid, stable, and in some cases stronger than when they were first built. And this is where it gets interesting, because what they used back then wasn't the same concrete we use today. It looked similar, but the behavior was completely different, and most people never question that, because we assume modern materials must be better. But what if that's not always true? What if something simpler was actually more durable and it just stopped being used because it didn't fit the system that came later? Because here's what most people don't realize. Modern concrete starts strong, but over time it develops tiny cracks, water gets in, chemicals react, and slowly it weakens. But ancient Roman concrete does the opposite. It starts strong, and then something inside it keeps reacting, keeps building, keeps reinforcing the structure from within. And that's the part nobody talks about, because it changes how you think about materials completely. So let's go back for a second. Ancient Rome, massive harbors, sea walls, structures built directly in ocean water, waves hitting them every day, salt, pressure, movement, conditions that destroy modern concrete in decades. But these structures are still there after 2,000 years, and scientists couldn't fully explain why for a long time, until more detailed studies started looking inside the material itself, and what they found was unexpected. Tiny white chunks inside the concrete, almost like impurities, something modern engineers would normally try to remove. But here's where it gets interesting. Those chunks turned out to be the key, because when cracks form, water enters and reacts with those particles, triggering a chemical process that fills the cracks from the inside, almost like the material is repairing itself. And this isn't just a theory. A study in 2023 from MIT confirmed that this self-healing effect is real and measurable, and it comes from the way the Romans mixed their materials, not just what they used, but how they combined them. And that brings us to the core ingredient, volcanic ash, something that was widely available around Italy, especially near areas like Pozzolana. And when this ash is mixed with lime and water, something unusual happens. Instead of just drying and hardening like regular cement, it creates a slow chemical reaction that continues over time, forming strong mineral bonds that actually grow stronger when exposed to water, and that's completely opposite to modern concrete, which weakens with water exposure. And this is where most people miss the point, because it's not about one special ingredient. It's about the interaction between simple materials, ash, lime, water, and aggregate, all working together in a way that keeps reacting long after the structure is built. And once you understand that, it starts to feel less like magic and more like smart chemistry. But here's the part that raises questions. If this method is so effective, why don't we use it everywhere today? And the answer isn't simple. Modern construction is built around speed, standardization, and cost efficiency. Portland cement sets fast, it's predictable, it fits into large-scale systems, but Roman-style concrete takes longer, it requires different materials, and it doesn't always match modern building codes. So even though it has advantages, it's not always the easiest option for today's industry. And over time, the difference in convenience shaped what became standard and what slowly faded away. Not because it stopped working, but because it didn't fit the system that grew around something else, and that's something you see in a lot of areas. The best solution isn't always the most used one. It's often the one that's easiest to scale. But here's where it gets even more interesting, because researchers today are trying to bring this idea back, studying how Roman concrete works, and finding ways to apply similar principles in modern materials, especially for long-lasting infrastructure. Because imagine roads, bridges, or seawalls that don't just degrade over time, but actually become stronger, that changes everything. And this is already happening in small ways. Experimental mixes, new formulations, all inspired by something discovered thousands of years ago. And that's the real takeaway here. Not that ancient people had magic materials, but that they understood how to use what they had in a smarter way, and that knowledge still exists. It just needs to be understood again, so if you're wondering what this means in practical terms, here's a simple breakdown. Roman concrete was made by mixing lime, volcanic ash, water, and small rocks. But the key difference was how they handled the lime. Instead of fully mixing it into a smooth paste, they left small chunks, and those chunks are what react later when cracks form, releasing compounds that fill the gaps and strengthen the structure. And while you can't exactly recreate ancient Roman concrete perfectly at home, the concept is still useful. Understanding how materials interact over time, how slow reactions can improve strength, and how water doesn't always mean damage, sometimes it means activation. And that shift in thinking is powerful, because it changes how you approach building, repairing, and even problem-solving in general. And here's the important part. This isn't about replacing everything we use today. Modern concrete has its place, especially in fast construction and high-rise buildings. But it's about realizing that there are alternatives, ideas that were tested by time itself, literally thousands of years. And that kind of proof is hard to ignore. So the next time you see a cracked sidewalk or a structure breaking down after a few decades, remember that there are materials out there that behave differently. Materials that don't just survive, but improve. And those ideas didn't disappear. They just stopped being talked about as much, and once you start noticing that, you begin to see how much knowledge gets lost simply because it's not repeated, not because it stopped working. And that's why sharing it matters, because the more people understand concepts like this, the harder it becomes for them to fade away again. And that's really what this is about. Not just concrete, but awareness. Understanding that simple materials can do more than we think when they're used the right way, and that history still has lessons we haven't fully used yet. So, if this opened your eyes, if it made you think differently about something as basic as concrete, subscribe, because this is the kind of knowledge that disappears when people stop sharing it. And the more people understand it, the more it comes back into the world where it belongs.